How you doing, guys? Where I work, we now have what we call a dick scale. We got customers who really are some of the cream of the crop. We just have a scale who's the biggest dick and who is the littlest dick. But for the most part, we know they're assholes. We got one guy who comes in. He's been coming in there for quite a few years. And I noticed one thing. He likes nobody. A couple of years ago, he approaches me. We had some new employees, and he says, "You got to get rid of her." "Why?" "I don't like her." "Okay, but that's not a reason to fire somebody." "Well, she's a whore." Matter of fact, he went around town saying that, and I don't know where he got this information from, but I noticed over the next few months he was having altercation after altercation after altercation, and he would go out of his way. Sometimes he would come in just to have an altercation with these employees. I finally pulled him aside. "Dude, you come in here, you don't buy anything, but you argue with people. I said, if you're not happy here, go somewhere else," which he eventually did for a while. But I noticed one thing. It was usually females he would start with. Guys he didn't seem to have too much trouble with, but for some reason, women seemed to rub him the wrong way. I don't know what he was expecting, but I finally approached him one day. I said, "Dude, you don't like girls, do you?" He gave me no answer. Well, he started coming in again after a while, and it was the same scenario. He wouldn't say too much, but you could usually see it in his face where he would go out of his way to ignore them. And at times, let's face it, you have to talk to them. My thing is, you don't like it, don't go there. But you're coming into it, it's a business. You come in, you buy something, you leave. But this guy would go out of his way to start altercation after altercation after altercation, and it was getting ridiculous. He's not a very likable person for the most part. I don't know too many people around here that do like him. I was out with a lady friend of mine one time, and as we're out, we see him. And he caught my eye, so he beelines it over. I'm like, oh, great, this is going to be good. Well, he starts jibber-jabbering, totally ignoring her, but just chewing in my ear, and I'm like, hoping that the conversation will soon end. Well, she interjected something. He immediately stops talking, looks at her. "Mind your business." I'm like, whoa. And she said something else, and he says, "Nobody is interested in your effing opinion." And I'm like, dude, that's enough. Well, he looks at me like he was shocked that I stopped him. Well, she got up for a second and walked away. And like, dude, don't you think that was kind of unnecessary? And he says, "Well, she interrupted me." And I says, "No, she was adding to the conversation. As I recall, you came over and interrupted." Well, he got a little PO'd about that and stormed off. It was a few days later I ran into him. And on occasion, he'll try to explain himself. And he says, sometimes things are not my fault. And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" "Well, I'm talking about the other night." And I says, "Dude, you were a complete asshole. You were in the wrong." And he justified what he was doing. He really didn't think he was in the wrong. And I says, "She interrupted me." And I says, "Dude, I already told you, you actually came over and interrupted us." And he says, "Well, it has to do a lot with my upbringing." And I'm like, dropping the F-bomb to a girl you've never met has to do with your upbringing? And he goes, "Yeah. I lost about 10 years of my life taking care of my grandmother." Now, I gathered he did not get along very well with his grandmother, and he was basically the caregiver. And he's going on, and my guess is he was angry at her. So I'm like, "Well, how long ago was this?" He said, "Well, she's been dead for over 10 years now." And I'm like, "So you're currently an asshole over something that happened over 10 years ago?" "Well, I just lost so much of my life." And I'm like, and whose fault is that? That's nobody else's fault. That's nobody's fault. But he tried to justify it. His current situation, the way he treats people, with something that happened over a decade ago. You're angry at a dead woman, so you take it out on everybody else around you, which is bullshit. And I've noticed this is quite common. People will actually be buttheads because of their upbringing. And my thing is, it's like, a lot of us have had a very bad upbringing. It does not give you the license to be a total dick to everybody around you. But I've noticed that a lot of people will use that as an excuse, especially in a courtroom. And it really doesn't hold a lot of water. And so you'll hear, well, it's not my fault. It was the way I was raised. Well, my thing is, if you're recognizing this, then why aren't you doing something about it? We had somebody in the community just a few short years ago who was notorious for this. I won't mention his name. Some of you may know who I'm talking about. But he was raised Jehovah's Witness, I guess 53 years or some bullshit like that. And he blamed the organization for being sexually repressed, uneducated, and basically his assholery, his current assholery, was the organization's fault. Well, when people finally got tired of his stalking women, his sexual innuendos, his inappropriate sexual innuendos, they finally stood up and said something to him, and he got offended. Well, now not only was it Jehovah's Witnesses' fault, it was now many in this community's fault, the way he was. Would not take responsibility for his own actions. You're being a dick. This was a guy who made inappropriate comments to women, and yet would not take the responsibility or even apologize for it. But he knew he had issues in his past, but did nothing to straighten out the present. And to me, is complete crapola. See, they try and justify it. They think it's okay as they go along, but as soon as somebody mentions it, they kind of blame their past. Okay, if you need professional help, by all means, seek it. But you're taking things out on people that are in your life currently, and people are not going to bend to your every whim. I mean, if you want to be a dick, that's fine, but nobody is going to want to have anything to do with you. And this is very, very common. I know quite a few people like this. And people who use their past for an excuse. Now, I was not raised a Jehovah's Witness, but I did not have a happy past. As a matter of fact, I grew up in a very abusive household. And at a young age, I had a tendency to be very abusive. I had a tongue that could cut like a knife. I was very controlling and had narcissistic tendencies. When I recognized this after my divorce, I says, this is not the way I want to live my life. So I had a lot of changing to do. I recognized the fact, I made a lot of comments about my ex-wife, but I had to take a lot of responsibility for that failed marriage as well. Because I was kind of a dick throughout that marriage as well. So I had a lot of changing to do. I had a lot of changing with me. Not so much on the outside, but with me. And this is the problem. People will not take responsibility for their own actions. Much like I talked about in my last video, it's always somebody else's fault. When people justify their current actions by their past, they're shifting the blame elsewhere. Well, this is because of the way I was raised. Okay, but you're not there anymore. If you recognize it, change it. Whatever it takes. If you need professional help, by all means, seek it. Unfortunately, some people just will never recognize that. And when you point it out to them, they generally will get butthurt. They will get offended. So you are now the asshole. This should tell you right there that you yourself have a problem. Like I said, a lot of us had a bad upbringing, but we don't carry it on into our present life and into the future. That's bullshit. Anyways, guys, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. I will talk to you guys soon. You have a good day.